If you had to guess what the biggest organ in your body is, what would you say? Your lungs are pretty huge, right? Or maybe your liver, which weighs about as much as 4 FIFA-approved soccer balls. You might not think it, but your biggest organ is actually mostly on the outside. That's right, it's your skin. If you stretched out all the skin on the average 150-pound adult man, it would cover over 2 square yards and weigh around 9 pounds. That's pretty darn large. The skin is responsible for a whole range of processes that keep us going day to day. But what would you do without it? Stick around to find out. First up, the basics. What actually is your skin? Well, the skin is made up of 3 main layers which all work together as part of the integumentary system. The top layer, or epidermis, is the part we can actually see and is made up of mostly dead skin cells and acts as a protective, waterproof wrap for the body. Skin thickness varies throughout the body from 0.5 millimeter at its thinnest, which you'll find on your eyelids, to 4 millimeters on the soles of your feet. The second layer, the dermis, helps to maintain the epidermis by diffusing nutrients to it and replacing skin cells that are shed off of upper layers. This is also where you'll find hair follicles, sweat glands, blood vessels, and a whole bunch of nerve endings and touch receptors that help us navigate the outside world. The final bottom layer is known as the subcutis, which is composed of subcutaneous fat, which insulates and helps cushion us when we bump into things, and connective tissue that binds the skin to muscles beneath. You should think of your skin as your body's main line of defense. It might sound kinda obvious, but without your skin holding everything nicely in place, you'd be nothing but a soggy mass of tissue, bodily fluids, and internal organs. Basically, you'd end up as a gelatinous blob on the floor, which isn't a good look for anyone. Skin also has some pretty cool regenerative properties, which can heal you whenever you get a cut or a scratch. As we know, the epidermis is constantly shifting off, replacing skin cells known as keratinocytes, and the entire layer actually gets renewed completely every 4 weeks. As new cells head towards the surface, they're filled with a hardened protein called keratin. When they reach the top, these overlapping skin cells form a protective barrier that stops any nasty, harmful bacteria from getting in. Although we may not notice it, your skin is also constantly making sure that you stay just the right temperature, which, FYI, is about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. If your temperature falls or rises dramatically, part of your brain called the hypothalamus sends a message to the skin to help regulate it. When you get too hot, blood vessels move warm blood to the skin's surface so that the heat can be released. Sweat glands also produce sweat, which helps cool you as it evaporates. Likewise, the skin can cause blood vessels to contract, moving warm blood away from the surface and toward our vital organs to keep us warm. When tiny muscles beneath the skin known as erector pili cause hairs on our skin to stand up, and when these muscles tighten and release quickly, this causes a sensation we call shivering. Finally, your skin is responsible for one of the 5 key senses, touch. Without it, your brain wouldn't receive all the information it needs to navigate the natural environment, which is based on accurate readings of temperature, humidity, and air pressure. On a daily basis, your skin is processing thousands of different physical sensations, which it does with the help of pressure-sensitive Merkel cells. In a single fingertip, there are 750 of these specialized cells per each square centimeter of skin, which are coupled with over 2,500 receptors to give you your sense of touch. That's some serious teamwork. Now that all that sciencey stuff is out of the way, let's go back to the big question. What would happen if you didn't have any skin? For you to lose all of your skin in one sitting, you'd probably have to be skinned alive, which, while highly unlikely, is still entirely possible. In fact, flaying, as it was once known, was a pretty popular form of torture in Aztec civilization, as well as ancient Greece, China, and Africa. Sometimes the victim would be even partly boiled first to soften their skin for removal, and in every case it resulted in an excruciatingly painful certain death. Although flaying has been banned for thousands of years now, a similar situation could occur as a result of some freak accident. In one famous case, a Japanese man ironically named Hasashi Ouchi lost the majority of his skin during an accident at a radiation plant he was working at. Ouchi was blasted with 17 sieverts radiation, which is the highest dose ever recorded and is more than double what is considered a mortal dose. Besides severe burns all over his body, Ouchi's entire immune system and DNA were eradicated, and his body was left near skinless and skeletal. Miraculously, he was kept alive for 83 days by various procedures including multiple skin grafts, but he continued to lose fluids through the pores of his burns and eventually died of multiple organ failure. In some rare cases, it's also possible to be born without skin to begin with. The condition, known as epidermolysis bullosa, affects less than 1% of all newborns and results in skin that is so thin and fragile that it blisters and falls off easily. This means anyone born with the condition must take extra precautions to protect their body from microscopic attackers and accidental injury. Let's imagine for a moment that you were to lose all your skin through flaying or some other violent means. What would happen? The most likely cause for your immediate demise would be sheer shock, which anyone would be lucky to survive after realizing their entire skin was suddenly in a heap on the floor. Unless the whole thing was grafted back on immediately, something that has never been attempted in medical history, your blood pressure would also drop to zero and you'd likely die from total blood loss. As your blood begins to evaporate at an unprecedented rate, you would then suffer from extreme dehydration. If one or a combination of these things wasn't enough to finish you off, it's safe to assume that hypothermia wouldn't be far behind. As we know, your skin is a key player in regulating the body's temperature, so without it, your vital organs would be exposed to the elements and would be subject to overheating or freezing. Considering your skin is your body's barrier to harmful pathogens, poisons, and irritants in the environment, you'd be pretty defenseless without it. Even if you had miraculously survived the problems I have already mentioned, you'd have to be some sort of superhuman to fight off the multiple infections and contaminations that would arise without your skin to protect you. A condition called acute skin failure, which occurs when the skin fails to carry out one of its three main functions, often results in hypothermia, increased fluid and protein loss, widening of the blood cells or vasodilation, and infection. With that in mind, it's safe to say that you wouldn't really stand a chance if you were suddenly stripped of your entire skin. So perhaps you should start taking better care of it. There are plenty of other parts of your body you couldn't live without, and your brain definitely seems to be one of them. Or is it? The brain needs no introductions. It serves as your central nervous system and contains approximately 15 to 33 billion neurons that control most processes in the body that facilitate life. Seems pretty vital to me. Except the truth is, you can actually live without almost all of your brain in your noggin. You see, although the brain is the most complex organ in the body, it's also the smartest. Duh. But what I mean by that is instead of assigning different functions to specific areas of the brain, each section is well equipped to pick up the slack and support itself if another part is damaged or breaks down unexpectedly. During this phenomenon, known as neuroplasticity, undamaged axons grow new nerve endings to reconnect neurons whose links were injured or severed. In some cases, people can also be born with congenital abnormalities or early brain damage, which results in little or no function in one hemisphere of the brain. Because this presents a risk of debilitating seizures like epilepsy, surgeons might choose to remove up to half of the brain in a surgery known as a functional hemispherectomy. Although this can have side effects like loss of movement on the opposite side of the body for adults, it actually has a pretty high recovery rate in children, and most young patients can expect to live a normal life afterwards. There have been plenty of extraordinary cases of people surviving with even less than half a brain in their skull. In 2014, a 24-year-old woman in China shocked doctors when she was found to be missing her entire cerebellum without even realizing. The cerebellum, or little brain, which is located at the bottom of the skull, contains about 50% of the brain's neurons and is responsible for coordinating key voluntary functions like speech, balance, and posture. The woman in question had a gaping hole instead, which was full of nothing but cerebrospinal fluid. She joins an elite club of just 9 people who have been known to live happily without their entire cerebellum, although she did admit that she took longer than most kids to pick up basic skills like speech. In an even more surprising case, a 44-year-old French man who complained of weakness in his left leg was sent for a brain scan at the University of Marseille, where neurologists were stunned by what they saw. There was not much of a brain to be seen at all, and most of the man's skull was taken up by fluid with a small smattering of brain tissue lining the inside. Although you would expect such a case to be mentally incapacitating, the man was not disabled in any way. In fact, he held down a job as a civil servant, and subsequent IQ tests showed his IQ to be only slightly below average. It may seem like these two people were just incredibly lucky, but both of these examples prove just how adaptable the brain can be. A rare genetic condition called hydranencephaly can also cause babies to be born without either of the cerebral hemispheres, which make up the main shape of the brain. In 2006, Nebraska woman Lorena Simpson gave birth to a baby girl named Alex who had almost no brain. Doctors predicted that Alex wouldn't live past 6 months, but she defied medical expectations by celebrating her 10th birthday a decade later in 2016. Although she requires special care around the clock, including an overnight supply of oxygen, Alex is capable of basic functions thanks to a little sliver of a cerebellum in the back right corner of her skull. In reality, as long as you possess the brainstem, which sits at the bottom of the brain and connects to the spinal cord, you can continue to live. This stem is vital in controlling crucial functions like breathing, swallowing, digestion, eye movement, and heartbeat, which means that without it, the body cannot sustain life. Although you can survive with reduced life expectancy and limited capabilities, the intricate things that make up the concept of you, such as memories, speech, identity, and personality traits, can exist fully without vital parts of your brain like the cerebellum or cerebral cortex. So it seems like our skin and our brain are pretty vital to living a comfortable life. But what about bones? I'll keep this one short and sweet. There are 206 bones in the average human body, and about 300 in a newborn, which make up the essential framework the rest of the body hangs on. Since all of your muscles are attached to the bones of your skeleton, it would be pretty impossible to go about daily life without them. Think about it this way. The human body without bones is just a semi-empty sack of blood, nerves, muscles, and organs. Plenty of animals like octopus, jellyfish, and tarantulas have no interior skeleton and get on just fine. But the same can be said for us. That's because every muscle movement, including the simple act of breathing, is totally dependent on the support and movement of the bones they're connected to. Without your spine to support you, you wouldn't even be able to stand up. Without this rigid structure to hold you together, you'd have nothing to protect the very things that keep you living, like your heart or brain, and you'd basically have organs popping out all over the place, which isn't a pleasant thought. So there you have it. Your skin, brain, and bones really are vital to your survival. So try not to lose them anytime soon. How long do you think you could get by without one of these things to keep you ticking? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.